Welcome in, Loons fans, to another edition of the Matchday Preview. Jonathan Harrison here, joined alongside regular co-host Manny Lagos. Manny, how are we doing today on this fine Thursday afternoon?
I think we're doing all right. I mean, again, done with another international break. Not as much soccer games from our Loons team that I'd like. So I'm really excited for this run of games coming up and hopefully the playoff push that we're going to be going for.
Absolutely. Got plenty of games coming up in quick order once again for Minnesota United. Now that the international break is done, and we'll talk plenty about that because there is a lot to discuss in the world of U.S. men's national team. But we're also joined by John Marthaler of the Minnesota Star Tribune. John, how are we doing today?
I think my favorite thing about this international break is that there was nothing to overreact to at all from a U.S. men's national team standpoint. I just very, even keeled. I'm ready to go and just, there's not, we'll all agree on everything for sure. That's what I know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Plenty to discuss there. Nothing controversial.
Nothing at all.
Or
Jesse Marsh is about to pop up in a window right here just to laugh right in all of our faces and then drop off the Zoom call.
Oh, man. Oh, and by the way, you clearly didn't get a red card because you're back so quickly. So.
I know. These suspensions are not what they used to be. I really think that the league office really needs to get tough on nonsense.
A little harsher on Caleb Porter than they are on you at this point.
Well, I mean, we're going to talk about Caleb Porter, right? I got a lot to say about Caleb Porter. I can't wait.
I didn't get a chance to watch the press conference. It was just insane. Did he just?
He popped off, said that Tim Ford, the referee, did he use coward? I can't remember.
He said that Tim Ford was a coward. Then he started talking about how much he likes Tim Ford. He says he's a nice guy. And then he ended by using a 7-letter expletive that starts with the word dumb to describe Tim Ford. So I mean, it was classic Caleb Porter where he was unhinged and then he was normal and then he was completely unhinged again to end it up with. Just, you appreciate that. We don't have enough unhinged stuff. Certainly, I mean, Minnesota, we're dealing with Eric Ramsey, Mr. Even Keeled, who's determined to be even keeled even if, someone slaps him in the face during a game. So it's nice to have a good old school Caleb Porter style meltdown after a game.
Well, it reminds me of the Vermes, post game at Allianz Field.
Caleb Porter didn't seem to think of bringing an iPad to hold up in front of himself on a Zoom call.
Well, as you've noticed, Loons fans, we've already jumped into the MLS discussion because just like the U.S. men's national team discussion, there's nothing controversial to discuss here. So
yeah,
I guess
that wasn't even the wildest refereeing thing of the weekend.
Right. So while we're already on the Caleb Porter conversation and what happened in New England, because New England played St. Louis and the Loons will play St. Louis this weekend, let's just jump right into that. We'll go to the other games as well and then come back to St. Louis. Controversial handball call. I'm going to give you guys each a minute to, based off what you know and what you've seen from across world soccer and officiating, to describe to me what a handball is, because obviously that was a controversial call in the St. Louis New England game this weekend. We've already talked about Caleb Porter's comments. So John, you start. Manny, you follow up.
All right. So this is an explainer for people who maybe have not followed a lot of soccer. A handball is when the ball hits someone's hand, and then if the moon is either waning or waxing, but it can't be full or a new moon. That's the key. If it's a full moon or a new moon, never a penalty. And it's got to hit you below the sleeve. But if you have long sleeves on, then you're allowed to do whatever you want. I'm not totally sure about that part. You can't catch the ball. I know that for sure. But beyond that, I don't know. And the handball rule, it changes every year. And then it changes along with the European season. So MLS will be like a year behind on it. I don't know. If the ball hits somebody's arm, sometimes it's a handball and sometimes it's not. And trying to discern which is true, I'll never be able to do it.
Like a catch in the NFL. You'll never know until you have to know.
Exactly.
Manny?
The hardest call in sports for soccer, really. I think, the reality is defenders are having to evolve, but they're having to evolve because they're tricky and they want to make their body big and they want to stop the cross or stop the shot, or they want to, leave their feet and then they kind of are unbalanced and maybe it's in an unnatural position or natural position. it's just tough calls. Like at the end of the day, I think it's become exacerbated with VAR, and now hopefully in the future there'll be more consistency from IFAB, from FIFA, and the referees will do a better job. But it's still kind of in this flux situation right now where I like how John said every game going into you're just not sure. You may or may not have a handball all the time. So really tough.
So was this a handball to you guys? Was this a handball offense? I know they went to VAR, they looked at it, they ruled it wasn't. Was this a handball offense to you guys?
No, I don't think. I mean, for me, the defender is jumping, which then you get in an argument about where your hands should be when you jump. And you can't jump like you're, imitating a dolphin with your hands down by your side. But at the same time, this defender was sort of lurching into the striker with both of his hands up here. So I don't know, but it didn't seem unnatural. It was a bang bang play. And it's just like with all handballs, it's like if you call that one, then there's 6,000 handballs that didn't get called this year. But conversely, if you don't call it, then you're affecting the game the other. It's just an impossible call. I don't think there's a way to define it that makes sense and is applicable in all situations. And I can tell you that because IFAB, who's in charge of this stuff, redefines it every single season.
I'm going to defer to John on it because I actually have not seen it, if I'm being honest. So, but I will say the only thing that I do get when I watch these kind of videos, I want to know if the player is sneakily trying to make himself bigger. That's it. And if it's just him jumping and then he's there, then I'm good. But sometimes players are clever in their way that they can make themselves bigger, but act like it's natural when it probably is maybe a little bit unnatural. But
it's just weird because you cannot have it where players are allowed to use their hands, but also it cannot be a handball every time it hits somebody's arm.
Yeah.
And so
because there was one earlier in the game where the ball hit Tim Parker's hand, but his hand was by his side. He clearly wasn't making his body bigger, and it was an easy call there. But it went off his hand. So as you said, it can't be a handball every single time it touches the hand.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it'd just get ridiculous.
I will say though that we have to also play and create habits based on the realities of the rules.
Yeah.
And if the rules are this nebulous and the effect of PKs are massive for the results, it's similar to when I used to coach players, like leaving your feet in the box has to be a very much like ready to do that. I'm ready to win the ball. I'm ready not to give up PK, or why am I leaving my feet? Because you're just going to present an opportunity for the referee to make a PK call. I do think that's the reality of defenders now. It's really hard. I get it. But at the same time, if you're going to kind of put yourself in awkward positions now or reach out to block with your leg and then that creates your arm high up in the air, you might want to rethink that type of movement because it might lead to a PK, which is a huge game changer in soccer.
That was just one controversial call. A second one happened in Columbus Crew versus Seattle. It ended up being a Seattle 4-0 win over the Crew, which for the Western Conference playoff race has a huge impact. For the Supporters Shield race also has a huge impact. Crew entered the weekend down their starting two goalkeepers because they were both away on international duty. Their third string goalkeeper gets a red card right into first half stoppage time, which means because weren't able to call up their MLS Next Pro goalkeeper because he's already been called up too many times. They went into the game without a backup goalkeeper, which meant Sean Zawadzki had to hop into goal right as Seattle were right in place for a free kick, an expertly placed free kick for Albert Rusnak. But Columbus had to go the rest of the match with a defender in goal, and because of MLS roster construction rules and the ability and inability to call up players after a certain amount of time, Columbus were kind of hurt due to playing during the international break, John.
Yeah, the funny thing is the controversial call in this one was made by the MLS League office on Thursday, not during the game. The call itself was not controversial. The goalkeeper comes flying out of the goal and honestly elbows both his own defender and Jordan Morris in the head. Yeah. Like if this was hockey, he would have been suspended 5 games for either one of those, for either what he did to the striker or to his own defender, just like a flying elbow like it was WWE now, sorry. And So the funny thing was that the league basically turned around to Columbus and said, "We're not giving you a hardship for this because you should have known better." I don't quite understand the reasoning in not letting Columbus call up an academy goalkeeper or something like that, just in case something like this would happen. Because as funny as it is to see a defender play in net for 46 minutes, and don't get me wrong, it's very funny. It's not something that should affect the playoff race. Like for anybody who's chasing Seattle, like for example Minnesota, they got to play, up against a team that didn't have a goalkeeper for 46 minutes. That affects stuff. And whether Columbus should have known this or not, and whether Columbus should have been better at planning so that they had somebody available for the game or whatever, it's not what anybody wants.
But at a certain point, they've already had to call up goalkeepers from MLS Next Pro a number of times because of international duty throughout the summer and everything. So they've already run up against their own limits. At that point, it's signing one of those goalkeepers from MLS Next Pro, which I believe because they want to make, I think Wilfred Nancy said he wants to make those signings mean something, that they weren't just going to sign them because they were in a hardship spot. So they kind of put themselves in that spot, but it's also just, again, it brings up the question of why we have these limits of the call-ups when you could just do it like everywhere else in the world where you're able to call up the academy kids whenever you want, Manny.
Yeah, I mean, I think my level of frustration starts with before the game in terms of I think the intention, I have a lot of rules are there, but this one frustrates me because from a technical vision, from a development vision, it seems like the wrong pathway. Ultimately, I think I would start with the league and the union, sort this out because it's actually detrimental to young players to not be allowed to get called up to first teams. I get excessively using a young player to the point that they should be a first team player, but there's no way it's 4 games. Just impossible. And I actually think the reverse is happening, where now you're not getting a young player to see him at that level enough. And so they're just going to wait longer. And there has to be a middle ground here where we have to do a better job between MLS and the union negotiating legitimate call-ups and things like that. And then let's even make it position specific. Goalies, it's so hard to get your minutes and get a chance. So this is the one position I would add a ton more call-ups to just in general, because it takes so long for goalies to find their way to get first team minutes and to frankly get minutes to be seen. So I start with that. And, in a weird way, I'm glad it happened because now we are talking about technical development vision stuff along with the second team and the good and bad, which is what we need to do. Ultimately, if there's going to be this massive investment in the second team, massive amount of young soccer players, we've got to make sure we get the pathway to at least figure out how we're going to develop right. And this was a failure. And in failure, it starts with the negotiation of the union. And I think the union, in their own way, I think they thought they were doing the right thing by trying to say, hey, we want our second team players to be abused by just being called to the first team. But I think now we can say, well, the flip is going to happen here. You're actually going to limit the times for your guys and limit the possibility for players getting the first team. And then I think just from the reality of the game itself, John mentioned it. It was against the team we're trying to catch, playing against the hottest team in the league. It emotionally frustrates a little more. And then I'll vent. Backup goalie, you get your chance. You can't get a red card. You can't. You just once you're there in that game, there's one thing you have to know is like, I can't get a red card. And he does the opposite. Gets the red card. Player goes in. I think Risnock's free kick was great, but it was like he was like, this is easy pickings. I got a non-goalie in goal. I just have to put it on goal in a good spot, and we'll get up 1-0. So that's my rant. That's all I got.
You would have wanted to talk to that keeper after the game and be like, at what moment did you think to yourself, I think I made a mistake? Was it when you left your feet and hit both guys that were coming towards you? No one sat you down before the game and said, listen, I know that you want to make a real good effort here, but maybe let's try to stay on the field for all night. All you really got to do is stay on the field for all 90 minutes.
Yes, manage the game.
Also, I do want to say that what I would like to see happen in terms of MLS rules has nothing to do with roster call-ups, because I'm a sports writer, and the most reliable story every year in the NHL is when some the goalkeeper gets pulled out of the crowd, because in the NHL they have somebody who's in the crowd who's played goalie or something like that. And twice a season, somebody gets pulled out of the crowd and ends up playing in the third period because they didn't have a backup goalie, and then the starting goalie gets hurt. And so somebody who is 45 and is a Zamboni driver, like happened in Carolina a couple years, or happened to Carolina and Toronto a couple years ago. Very reliable story. Wonderful. I remember it. I remember the guy's name, David Ayers. That is what I need as a sports writer, is that kind of thing. I wanted a 47-year-old guy to get pulled out of the crowd in Columbus to play goal. Not a defender. Way better if it's a random backup goalkeeper out of the crowd.
I forget the actual term for it, but yeah, the extra goalkeeper in the crowd just waiting there.
Yeah.
It's a glorious story every year in the NHL.
And I think we need to think hard about who that would be at Allianz Field. Like, there's got to be an old goalkeeper just sitting around waiting to go. Somebody's like 52. Manny, you got to know somebody.
Manny, who are some of the older goalkeepers that we had on the club in the past that are still in the area that we could use?
Joe Warren?
Is Joe Warren still around? Oh, it's Joe Warren for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
100%.
John Swollen?
Yes. Those two.
Absolutely.
I want those two just sitting there in goalkeeper gear in section 103 in Allianz Field, just waiting this.
They got to sit in the Wonderwall right behind the net, so they're just sitting there over the goalkeeper's shoulder.
Absolutely.
We're waiting.
There's like the capo stand, and then they're just standing there with their arms crossed right in front of it, waiting to go in.
They would be both of those guys, knowing them, they'd be ready. They'd be ready to perform. So
that's exactly what I want to happen.
I love it. All right. So continuing on the controversy and controversial topics, U.S. men's national team, a 2-1 loss to Canada and then a 1-1 draw with New Zealand. I'll be honest, I didn't watch too much of these games. I was a little busy this weekend, so you guys might have to fill me in. What happened in these games? What's the issue with the U.S. men's national team? Is this just a deal with another interim manager, and everybody knows that the new manager, Mauricio Pochettino, is coming in, so they kind of took the games off? Or is there a bigger issue at hand that Mauricio Pochettino is going to have to fix here heading into the World Cup, John?
Near as I could tell from those games, and I saw the highlights of one and I saw a bunch of the other one, but near as I can tell, the USA is terrible at soccer again, and we need to burn it all down and start over, because it was bad. It was real bad. And the worst part was just Jesse Marsh there laughing. Like, I'm trying to think, what Nintendo game am I thinking of? Where's Duck Hunt? Remember Duck Hunt from way back in the day when the dog would pop up and just laugh in your face when you screwed up? That was Jesse Marsh during those games.
I think for me, if I want to relate to Minnesotans, I feel like the U.S. national team's kind of like Uptown right now.
I like it.
Yeah, it's just it's got so much potential, but right now it really is kind of in a dumpster fire moment of just figuring out when Pochettino gets here, and then what are we going to do? And it was not a great break for us. There's no doubt about it. I think Canada looks a little bit like their role players in Europe are hungry to be role players in or in their Canadian national team. Whereas I think we're still trying to find our talent level and then what it's going to be. I certainly think it was not a great window. And I think the only thing you can say is Pochettino announced his hiring, and we're going to get going now. So I'm excited to see where we go from here. Just like Uptown, hopefully it's up and getting better.
I'm glad you didn't say downtown St. Paul, because that would be then there's no hope.
But yeah, what a bad window ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really is. I'm nervously optimistic. Obviously, we've got a core of players now who have great expectations, and hopefully, we tried some players out in this window, so I do like that. I like seeing players, and I like seeing how they perform. But also, it's hard to have these. I guess they weren't even home games, considering the U.S. soccer didn't really get great crowds for them. But to have these games in the U.S. and have a loss and a draws against the type of opponents we were playing is tough. So, correct me if I'm wrong. Is this our first time at home losing to Canada in like?
It's been, I think, over 20 years or something like that. It's been a while. I think actually since like the 90s. It's been that long since they've lost to Canada at home. It's been a long time. Do you guys view this? I know there are expectations for what the U.S. men's national team are going to do in the World Cup since it's at home. Now you have Mauricio Pochettino adding to this. Because of what's gone on in this last window and what's happened at Copa America, is this kind of as clean of a slate as Pochettino will have heading into taking over this job?
I mean, for me, I think it's probably the most like we're not asking him to create a 10-year plan for us playing a 4-3-3,
Yeah.
and building out a youth system. We're literally asking him to come in and get a group of core guys ready to committed to make a run in the World Cup in 26. So I do feel like it's a pretty clear situation of what the expectation is. And in some ways, I think it simplifies it that he doesn't need to come in and save all of US soccer. He just needs to come in now and over the next 18 months really build a group of guys, be ready, committed to compete in the World Cup. So I think there's the direction is clear what he has to do.
John?
Certainly, maybe it's a benefit for Pochettino because he can come in now and nobody's going to be like, listen, everything was fine before you got here. Where, what are you going to tell us? This is a low point for sure.
Just because the Loons are away doesn't mean you have to watch the match from home. With Loons Watch Spots presented by Coors Light, you can find a piece of that Allianz Field atmosphere at some of your favorite Twin Cities locations. Check out the full list of locations and upcoming watch parties at MNUFC.com/Loons Watch Spots. Yeah, absolutely. So I know we're on a limited time here, so we'll jump right into the St. Louis City conversation. Loons playing at St. Louis this Saturday, 7:30 p.m. kickoff, 7 p.m. pre-match show. Myself and Dan Terrard on 1500 ESPN. You can watch that one on MLS Season Pass as well. Unbeaten are St. Louis in their last 4 league matches, fresh off that controversial 2-2 draw against New England, which they created, I believe, 21 shots and 11 on target. They, according to American Soccer Analysis, St. Louis have created the most shots for themselves this season out of anybody in the league. This is a team that, yes, they started the season poorly. They've struggled to get back into play or in the playoff spots. They're 8 points out of the playoff spots right now, but they do know how to create their chances and take their chances. It just all hasn't come together for them, Manny. What's the scouting report on St. Louis heading into this one on Saturday?
It has a little bit of similarity to San Jose in that, we're catching a team that I think has played some good soccer of late and some good quality results even and are going to be tough at home. So again, I think the nice thing with the San Jose game away was that was a really great start for us and it led to us having a great result. So I think we have to be ready for a team that's going to be hungry to kind of push the tempo at home and with a little bit of confidence. But I also know they've been pretty inconsistent on both sides of the ball. So it's going to be really important that we take that note that they have not been consistent this year. And that if we play well, we're organized, compact, defend well, and get forward, I think there's goals to be had in this game. And I think there's a good chance of us getting an away win.
Do you guys, going into this one, based off what we saw in those 2 games coming out of Leagues Cup play, do we go with the same starting 11 that we saw in San Jose, John, or is there going to be changes now that Joaquin Pereira is in town? He's with the club. We saw Tani Oluwaseyi play for Canada. We saw him play for Minnesota before the international break. Do you expect changes to the starting 11, or do you think Eric will just go with the same starting 11 and see what happens throughout the match?
Well, as much as I think you'd love to go with the same starting 11, I think the international break is going to maybe throw a wrench into that because you've got a guy like Josef Rosales who played 90 minutes twice during the international break. And that's not to say that other guys didn't play. The whole team played a 60-minute scrimmage last Thursday, so everybody's gotten a little bit of game time. But it's different when you look at a guy like Rosales who played a lot, or Pukki and Robin Lod who are flying everywhere around. They've been to Finland, they've been to Greece, they've been everywhere, and now they're coming back yesterday. The Loons are training Thursday afternoon. We're recording on a Thursday. They're training on a Thursday afternoon just to try to get everybody back to town and a little rested before they have a training session. But I think that's going to affect it more than anything that Ramsey wants to do, because they also have starting Saturday, I think 6 games in 22 days, something like that. Yeah. It's a 4-week stretch of 6 games. So fatigue is going to play a factor. And I think they have to, I think the Loons are going to be honest with themselves about this is going to be a lot of games, and they can't just necessarily go, yeah, everybody's got to play. Everybody's going to play a bunch. The one guy I sort of left out of this was Michael Boxall, because even if his foot was visibly detached from his body and dragging along behind him, he would say, no, I'm fine, I'm going to play. And then, as a coach, you have sort of that hard moment where you're about to tell him he's not going to play and you have to weigh up how much you want to get punched in the face. You know what I mean? So I've never been a coach, but I got to imagine that's hard.
Especially when Boxall's older than you as the head coach.
Yeah, and tall. And he's just glowering at you. He's got that New Zealand where you're just like, I don't want to, whatever, please leave me alone. Leave me unhurt, Michael Boxall.
Do we expect? Yeah, go ahead.
Right. No, I think to your point, I think it's a fascinating storyline going into the game. I mean, what is the starting 11 going to be based on fresh legs, based on the San Jose result, based on what is the system going to be? Ultimately, that game in San Jose, we got on the front foot in a 3-5-2, which was great to see, and it was really effective. So does he stick with that, or does he look at the fact that we might not have all fresh legs, but we are as healthy as we've been in months? We've got more guys now available for him to make these decisions. And then you have that other question, like Jonathan kind of mentioned there, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, how are we going to manage the 3 games in 7 days? And we're at that time of the year where I can use the cliche, game by game is kind of important now. Points are really important. We've played really well on the road this year, by the way. I think that's kind of helped us be in the playoff chase. Our home form is where we've gotten caught down the table where we should be a little bit higher up. But it's exciting that we got 4 on the road, and we played at least well on the road for this final push to make the playoffs.
Do we expect? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I also think it's notable that St. Louis is playing at home because their home record is better than Minnesota's home record. They just haven't won a game on the road all season. So playing in St. Louis is a bigger deal than having St. Louis come to Minnesota.
By the way, guys, as journalists here, I make this debate to people that maybe look at soccer bigger than MLS era of 1996 to now. I argue that I think St. Louis might be the most historic soccer city in the country. If you go over the scope of the history of U.S. soccer.
It's kind of weird. You look at American soccer history, and then you would expect it to be like all Los Angeles all the time, but it's like St. Louis, Pennsylvania, just randomly Pennsylvania's like Bethlehem, Pennsylvania is one of the most historic soccer towns in America. Just okay, whatever you say. So it goes for a lot of things where it's like you'd imagine New York, LA, that would be your hotbeds, but St. Louis, it doesn't get a lot bigger than St. Louis.
Yeah, I think for Minnesotans, just even in the youth soccer scene, it's a big deal for boys and girls soccer players to go out of our island sometimes. Going to St. Louis back in the day, even now, I think is a big deal for the youth soccer communities because it was one of those soccer hubs for the country, and it wasn't nearly as far to travel to Pennsylvania or Kearney or LA. St. Louis was kind of like the big ship for a lot of Minnesotans growing up to go play and see where they test their level playing against other opponents.
Yeah, absolutely. So back to the lineup questions that I got for you guys. Pereira, I'm mispronouncing that name, obviously. I'm still practicing it. How does he fit into this?
Just go with Joaquin.
I'll just go Joaquin here for now. How does he fit into this lineup? Because obviously he's got the talent. We know he's got the skills, and there's a lot of expectations for him. How do we see him fitting into the lineup? Where does he slot in, Manny?
Well, again, I think the nice thing is, he's a center midfielder that can break lines with passing. He can drift higher up the field into spaces where it's sometimes tough for a lot of players at this level to keep the ball and retain it. So whether it's Eric thinking about playing a 3-5-2 or 3-4-3 or even some type of 4-1-4-1, there's spots in that middle of the field for him. There's no doubt. The question will be, getting up to speed with his fitness and also him trying to decide the dynamic of Robin Lode, Will Trapp, Hassani Dotson, all those pieces fit. But certainly having another player that can break lines, both passing and seeing things, I think will just add another dynamic offensively as we build for this run.
I think an important note for this match is where St. Louis sit in the standings and what this game could mean for their chances of making the playoffs. Currently 13th in the Western Conference, 28 points on the season out of 28 games. Minnesota, 9th place in that final spot in the playoffs on 36 points. So an 8-point gap there. St. Louis and Minnesota meet up twice down the stretch here of the season. St. Louis has 6 games left in the season. Minnesota could go a long way this weekend, John, to taking out one of their playoff rivals with the win this weekend, because if St. Louis essentially needs to win every single one of their games to even have a chance of getting back into the playoffs, if Minnesota can beat them here at here in St. Louis, that goes a really long way to potentially taking out one of your playoff rivals.
Yeah, I think you're right in saying that St. Louis has 6 games left, and if they're going to make the playoffs, they have to win all 6. Even winning 5 out of 6, I don't think is going to be enough for them to make the playoffs. So their backs against the wall, but you can see from the fact that they haven't lost in 4 games, which included, the weird game in New England, a 4-4 draw at Portland of all things. They haven't quit. They haven't quit on the season. Yeah. They got a new coach, and they're going to have a lot of guys who are, not only playing for this season, but playing for next season, playing for their jobs. So it's not a team that's playing out the string, I don't think.
No, certainly not. They're a team that is, as you said, continuing to fight through and battle every match. This is going to be a tough one, Manny. And a couple of the players that are certainly to watch for Loons fans this weekend. Roman Berkey, one of the better goalkeepers in the league, one of the better save percentages in the league this season. Simon Betcher scoring a couple goals over the past couple games up top for St. Louis. Who are the players outside of those two guys that maybe Loons fans should keep an eye on this weekend?
Well, I certainly think we kind of had so many different areas we could have gone at the national break. We focused on the U.S., but obviously Dane had a great game against Mexico, outstanding. So the matchup this weekend, the goalies, Dane against Berkey. I mean, you're talking about two, I think, of the better goalies this year in the league. I think it's must-watch TV for both those guys, if I'm being honest. They're outstanding. Berkey is obviously a little bit older, but what a great goalie. And Dane is just coming into his own and getting better and better. So I love that matchup of the goalkeepers. And you're right. I think the interesting about Betcher is he's got this infectious kind of quality of finding finishes and goals, and he's tough to handle. He really is. He's kind of wiry and long, and finds himself in good spots to find goals, and he seems to score in a lot of different ways. So credit to him, somebody who's kind of up and coming in their career. So it'll be interesting to see how we handle him, considering he's on kind of a nice goal scoring streak of late.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting one to watch. Again, that game kicks off 7:30 p.m. Central Time Saturday night on MLS Season Pass. Pre-match show with Dan Terra and myself on 1500 ESPN at 7 p.m. with kickoff, just as I said, just after 7:30 p.m. as well. Looking forward to that one. Guys, plenty of soccer coming up this weekend across Major League Soccer. And I know we like to do these pick segments, so let's jump right into this. Manny's favorite named derby of the league, Hell is Real derby, Cincinnati.
It's El Tráfico, by the way. It's El Tráfico. Come on. It's
bad name. Poor name. We can do better. We can do much better.
I disagree. I love the names of both of these rivalries, but I
like Hell is Real. I don't like El Tráfico.
I by the way, I didn't realize the sign and the whole Cincinnati club. I'm much more into it now, but it doesn't beat El Tráfico for me. It just doesn't. It just until I'll give you guys a story. We were one time playing in LA, staying in Santa Monica, and it said 2.5 hours to the stadium on the traffic. And if we didn't have a police escort, there's no way we got there in 30 minutes. But it's just it's El Tráfico. It makes perfect sense. California.
Yeah. Jonathan's wrong about that. That's a great
I'll gladly die on this hill that I'm wrong. But
that's fine.
Yeah. Not a fan of El Tráfico. So let's start off with Hell is Real. Then we'll get to El Tráfico. LA Derby, whatever. Cincinnati hosting Columbus. John, you go first. Who are you picking in this one? I assume Columbus will have all their.
Will Columbus have a goalkeeper? That's a big question for me. If they have a goalkeeper for the entire game, I still think Cincinnati's going to pull that one out. I like Cincinnati at home in that one. Honestly, the answer is probably draw, but I'm going with the Cincinnati win.
And that's one we'll certainly have to watch because Cincinnati coming to town on Wednesday before we speak again. So obviously keeping an eye on that one. Manny, you're picking this one.
Yeah, I think the weirdness of that Columbus game ends their streak a little bit, and I think they're going to have to build up again. So I've got Cincy as well. That was just such a chunky loss that they had that I think that they're going to take a little more time to recover. But and I also think it's a big one to keep our eye on because that home game this Wednesday is massive. I mean, getting through this weekend's massive, but showing our fans, showing our own club, we want to really push for the playoffs. We got to start winning games at home to finish the season up.
That's not going to be easy because Cincinnati have one of the best away records in the league this year, 9-3-1 away from TQL Stadium. That's going to be tough on Wednesday. Looking forward to that one. I think I'm going Cincinnati as well. the way that Columbus lost that one, yes, they were down a goalkeeper, they're down a man for much of the match, but still, that's a 4-0 loss. Those are hard to come back from, especially when you're going up against your in-state rival. That's going to be tough. LA Galaxy hosting LAFC, battle for the top of the Western Conference. LAFC have a number of games as they're trying to make up some of their schedule over the next couple weeks. Who are we picking in this one, Manny? LA Galaxy hosting.
I am going to go with a draw. So controversial draw, though. Something crazy is going to happen where the Galaxy
pick up right where we left off last week in MLS.
Yes, exactly. Some kind of weird goal or wheel call at the end. Just something crazy is going to happen in this one. Though. There'll be some drama, but I think it's the Galaxy's going to have to fight back for the point.
John,
I think I'm going to take LAFC in this one because they can beat any team in North America except for the Columbus Crew, and so. I think they'll beat the Galaxy.
What about Houston Dynamo? They just
true. Yeah, they also can't beat Houston.
I think I'm going
a random subset of teams they can't beat. I'll give them that.
Yeah. There's nothing that connects those two teams to
right.
why they get the better of LAFC.
They both like to keep the ball. I guess there's that. So if the Galaxy are going to keep the ball in this one, that's good. But still, the soccer, the teams, the markets have nothing in common.
I will say the intrigue for me in this game is really Olivier Giroud. They haven't quite hit full, like they were playing so well before he came, and now they're just playing okay. I'm always intrigued by is that going to flip and they'll get confident before the playoffs, or is this actually going to drop their level because they added a player late in the season who's a big personality and they can't quite get their form that they had earlier. So I am intrigued about his role and how that plays into their level because certainly LAFC has not looked good in the last 3 weeks.
I think I'm picking LAFC on this one. They've got a number of games. They've got a lot to fight for here. LA Galaxy, I want to see if they can hold off LAFC, but I'm going with LAFC on the road here. Final game that I want you guys to pick in this one, just looking at the playoff race, Austin FC right in the rear view mirror of Minnesota at this point, just I believe 2 points behind the Loons in the standings. They head up to Toronto this weekend. Toronto in that wild card spot in the West or in the Eastern Conference, excuse me. Who are we picking in this one, John? Toronto hosting Austin this weekend.
One of these things is not like you've got Hell is Real, El Trafico, and then Austin and Toronto. Just the absolute the biggest sicko game on the MLS schedule this week. Like if you are planning to sit down and watch Austin and Toronto, good for you. But man, you are out there. I'm going to pick Toronto. Playing Toronto's at home. I'm going to pick Toronto.
Yeah, Manny.
You guys know. I mean, any team that's in the playoff, definitely Toronto. Let's just have them wake up and win at home. That's what we want. So.
I like it. I think I'm going Toronto here just off of wanting the Loons to obviously make the playoffs and Austin to not come anywhere close to Minnesota United down the stretch here. I'm going Toronto, especially because Austin 3-7-3, I believe, on the road this season. That's a tough trip to make up to Toronto, who have been pretty decent at home this season and look like they're starting to finally turn things around up there. I'm going Toronto on this one. Boys, it's been good talking to you guys this week and preparing for a big matchup against St. Louis City this coming weekend. 7:30 p.m. kickoff on MLS Season Pass, 7 p.m. pre-match show with Dan Terrar and myself coming up Saturday evening on 1500 ESPN. We'll talk to you guys next week when we'll break down the St. Louis game and the Cincinnati game as well. And then Loons fans, we'll talk to you right back here next week.